From the National Catholic Register, this is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
Pope Leo is set to canonize 7 new saints this Sunday, even as a Vatican court moves ahead with its trial of former Jesuit and artist, Fr Marco Rupnik. This week on Register Radio, we're joined by Catholic News Agency Senior Vatican Correspondent Hannah Brockhaus. And then we mark World Mission Sunday this week with Msgr Roger Landry, National Director of the Pontifical Mission Society USA. Hello, I'm Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director for EWTN News, joined as always by Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register. How are you, Shannon?
I'm well, Matthew. Thank you.
Well, as you know, only weeks after the canonizations of Saints Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati, Pope Leo XIV will preside over the canonizations of 7 new holy women and men, including 2 saints from Venezuela and a one-time Satanist who repented and gave his life to Christ. With a preview of the canonization, we're joined by Hannah Brockhaus, Catholic News Agency Senior Vatican Correspondent. Welcome, Hannah. Welcome back to Register Radio.
Thank you, Matthew. Glad to be here.
So this has been sort of a canonization fest over the last few weeks. Compared to, I know, the excitement that surrounded the canonization of Carlo Acutis and of course also Pier Giorgio Frassati, how's the mood as we head into this weekend with these new canonizations?
Well, of course, there's a lot of excitement about these as well. I think there was definitely a risk of them being a little bit overshadowed following so shortly after, as you pointed out, Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati's canonization. But these 7 men and women really also deserve to be highlighted. And so I'm really glad we're talking about them today.
Speaking about overshadowed with this new group, it's hard to compete with the story of Blessed Bartolo Longo. This is the Italian layman and lawyer, the founder of the Shrine of Our Lady of the Rosary in Pompeii, who was deeply involved in satanic sex and had a dramatic conversion. Tell us a little more about him, but there's some other interesting stories, right, Hannah?
Absolutely. So one thing I was just learning myself about Bartolo Longo, I mean, there are so many interesting aspects of his story, but another is that he experienced a lot of difficulties with his mental health, depression, possibly suicidal ideation and things of that sort, that some of that did not go away after his conversion, because that was part of the struggle that ended up leading him to talk to a priest, that led to his, reversion actually to Catholicism, because he was brought up in the faith. But that was something that he continued to struggle with. And so a Dominican priest, the promoter of the Rosary for the order, was pointing out how he could also be a great model and witness for people who have mental health struggles.
Yeah, as we look at someone like Bartolo Longo, who dedicated his life so profoundly, can you talk also about his work in Pompeii and the shrine there?
Yeah, he was from that area and realized that the faith was just losing ground there. I mean, politically, that time in Italy was a difficult moment for the Catholic faith during the period of unification in Italy. And so he, through the Rosary, wanted to revive the faith there. So he founded this shrine that continues to be a popular shrine, continues to be a popular devotion. And he considered the Rosary really his weapon at the time to promote Christian belief and devotion.
Yeah.
Hannah, he is one of 7 individuals who will be declared a saint this weekend. Tell us about some of the others.
Right. So another 2, I'd say, historic canonizations are these 2 Venezuelans. So they'll be the first man and first woman from Venezuela to be canonized. So that in itself is incredibly important. One of them is I like to call him Dr. Jose Hernandez. So he was a layman and known as the doctor of the poor because of his dedication to helping the poor. And the second is Maria del Carmen Rendiles Martinez, who was actually born with a profound disability. She didn't have her left arm. And so she lived her whole life using a prosthetic arm, and she wanted to join religious life, felt called to that. And of course, it was difficult at the time. This was the early 1900s, sometimes to be allowed to join a religious order with a disability. But she did succeed, and then later founded as well her own religious community. So I think this is just obviously a really profound moment for the people of Venezuela to receive these two saints from the church, and in a time that, of course, as we know, they're living through a very difficult time under dictatorship. So this will be hopefully an encouragement to Catholics in Venezuela this weekend.
And a little farther afield, even than these other saints, is Peter Torot, who will be the first saint from Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, he's another very interesting figure, especially because he was also a layman. So again, living in the early 1900s, and is considered a martyr because he was killed by lethal injection for not following, the rules at the time. He was arrested and sent to a manual labor camp because while Papua New Guinea was under Japanese oppression, and so he was a really great defender of the faith. He was a catechist. He helped other Christians in that area and his village keep the faith. And he defended also Christian marriage, which at the time, that he was living, and even today continues the problem of polygamy in Papua New Guinea. So he was a good supporter of that. Of the Christian view of marriage, obviously, not polygamy.
Yeah, Hannah, let's talk about less happy news, although it's a positive development, is the Father Marco Rupnik case. That's something you've been following for years. The news this week is that there are finally judges in place to hear his case about charges of serial psychological, spiritual, and sexual abuse. So I'm going to ask you a question that you've probably been asked 500 times, and there's probably not an answer. But it was 2 years ago, more than 700 days ago, that the statute of limitations was lifted by Pope Francis to allow this case to go forward. It's and incredibly during that time, Father Rupnik has been free to exercise his ministries as far as we know. So what has taken so long, Hannah?
That's a really good question. And I don't know if we have a clear answer for why it has taken so long. Part of it might be the complication of Rupnik's case, not really a straightforward case in church law as the law currently stands. I know I spoke to an official at the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith about a year ago. So, now it's been 2 years, as you pointed out, since the statute of limitations was lifted. And they could start, looking into actually sort of prosecuting, if you will, this case. But basically, it sounded like it's been a struggle for them to figure out what is the best way under church law to go about this. So part of the time that it's taken was probably devoted to that. We had an update last January, so January 20 of this year, that they had finished gathering the materials and kind of compiling, I'm sure, the witness statements and all of that in the case. And so then it took from then until now, until October, just to find, identify, and appoint officially the judges. That they've made a great point of choosing men and women from outside of the Roman Curia, so outside of the Vatican, from outside of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, because they said, independent people looking at this case, looking at the materials and making a decision. This is, I think, a good sign that hopefully a decision will be coming soon, but it all depends on how long it takes them to go through the material, how often they're meeting. We just don't know some of those details about the timeline going forward, unfortunately.
Yeah, just to note, during this waiting period, people have written books about this case. People have published investigations. A documentary has been produced and aired. It's just taken so long. So would you think we're talking about 2026 before we get a resolution to this, Hannah?
Gosh, I really hope we could have something before Christmas, before the end of this year. But looking at how long each of the other stages have taken, maybe it's more realistic, early 2026. We're going to, be asking the Vatican for more answers. Hopefully we'll get some of it just about that. But for right now, on the limited information we have, it might be next year.
And very briefly, this news came just before the publication yesterday of the new report from the Commission on the Protection of Minors. Can you talk again very briefly about what you're seeing in terms of the policy moving forward under Pope Leo?
Right. So obviously, the annual report, since this was the second annual report of the Pontifical Mission for the Protection of Minors, that's something that started under Francis's pontificate, but will continue under Leo as well, just examining how the church is doing at child protection and abuse prevention, and as well as reparation for victims in different parts of the world. But another angle that the Vatican is taking on this is, of course, as well, a commission established last year to examine the idea of spiritual abuse and what spiritual abuse as a crime could look like. Right now it's more of an aggravating factor to other crimes, but not a crime on its own. On its own. So that's another issue that the Vatican is investigating, and if that goes forward and some changes are made to the penal law of the church in that regard, that's something that could also impact the Rupnik case, actually.
Yeah. Well, and I know you'll be covering all of it. So as always, thank you, Hannah, for your great report.
Of course.
Well, when we come back, we're joined by Msgr Roger Landry, National Director of the Pontifical Mission Society USA, to mark World Mission Sunday. This is Register Radio on EWTN.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
And welcome back. I'm Matthew Bunson here with my co-host, Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register. Well, World Mission Sunday is held every year on the second to last Sunday of October. This year, it will take place this Sunday, October 19th, with the theme of Missionaries of Hope Among the Peoples. And we are blessed by the presence of Msgr Roger Landry, who's the National Director of the Pontifical Mission Society USA, to tell us all about the importance of World Mission Sunday. Msgr, welcome.
Great to be with you, Matthew. Great to be with you, Shannon. World Mission Sunday is the time where Catholics all across the globe pray for the missionaries all serving the church in 1,124 missionary territories and dioceses across the globe. And we take up the only collection that's mandated in the church's canon law in order to be able to support the growth of the church in those areas in which the Christian faith is either young, where the Christians are too poor to be self-sustaining, or where Christians are being persecuted. And so this is a day in which we continue to do what Jesus told us in the gospel, to pray to the harvest master for hardworking laborers for his harvest, to pray for those who are meant to be part of that harvest, and then to recognize that as we're praying, just like Jesus did with his first 12, he's summoning us one way or the other to take up our crucial role in the ongoing of Jesus' mission.
Msgr, the piece you wrote for the Register, available at ncregister.com, Help Me Help Missionaries, Pope Leo's Historic Video Appeal. This was a really interesting. You mentioned the fact, two important facts. One is that Pope Leo earlier this week had recorded a video message in support of people participating in World Mission Sunday. He's the first pope to do that, number one. The other interesting, maybe not so positive thing is that even though this is the only canonically required universal collection, there's a lot of parishes, a lot of pastors that for whatever reason don't participate. As the national director of the Pontifical Mission Society in the United States, how are you working to change that?
So first, let's talk about Pope Leo. Every year since St. Paul VI, in the early 1960s, the popes have given a written message for World Mission Sunday, and Pope Francis did on January 25th early this year, in which he gave a beautiful reflection on the theme of World Mission Sunday this year, which is Missionaries of Hope Among the People, taken within the Jubilee. But we have never had a video message from the Holy Father basically speaking to every Catholic, saying that he was hoping that every Catholic parish all across the globe would participate in World Mission Sunday. First, not celebrating it just like any other Sunday in green, but praying for the mission, having the priests or the deacons who are preaching in their parishes preach about the importance of our missionary identity flowing from our baptism, and then to take up that collection. Every year, the World Mission Sunday collection amounts to about $70 to $75 million for the cure of the church globally, and the United States pays anywhere from a third to two-fifths of that collection across the globe because of the generosity that American Catholics give to the mission. But what we've started to see, which is the second point that you said, is because a lot of parishes are no longer using envelopes like everybody used 20 or 30 years ago or more, in the electronic collection, many times it's not specified that the second to last Sunday in October is World Mission Sunday. It's just a generic second collection. And if somebody's setting up a few months of digital contributions to a parish and they don't see that it's for the mission, they might just give something, but might not give as generously as they would if they recognize where it was going. And then sometimes you've got this new phenomenon, which is not really in alignment with the way the church thinks, not to mention the freedom of Catholics, in which pastors in so-called stewardship parishes only take up one collection on Sunday, even when there's an international collection or a national collection or a collection that you have to do for the diocese. Instead, they just take a certain percentage, normally it's a tithe of 10% of the first collection, and they give it to whatever the second collection should have been. And that strips the average Catholic of the opportunity to say, I really want to support the mission with greater generosity, or I want to support the Catholic University of America's collection, or I want to support the Church in the Holy Land, or whatever comes up over the course of the year. And so because of that, the World Mission Sunday collection has been gradually going down. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with those electronic giving companies that various parishes choose to make sure that they specify what the second collection is rather than just leave it generic. And we're trying one by one, as we hear about the parishes that don't take up second collection, to ask them at least to make an exception on World Mission Sunday so that Catholics, especially hearing Pope Leo this week, if the video is shared with the parishioners before Mass, either electronically or on a video before the Mass begins, that their desire to help the Holy Father, help those in the mission, would be able to be concretized by a collection that will go straight to the Holy Father's mission.
Yeah, in his video message, the Holy Father sort of leaned into his own extensive experience as a missionary priest, as a missionary bishop of course, in Peru, in the Diocese of Chiclayo, talking about how he saw firsthand how the faith, the prayer, and the generosity on World Mission Sunday can transform entire communities. From your standpoint, then, as a national director for the Pontifical Mission Society, how remarkable is it that we have a pope who was so active for so long in the missions?
It's historic, as you and I, Matthew, were mentioning many times when we were covering the papal
Yes.
election in Rome together a few months ago, that Pope Leo was really the first who had dedicated his life to sharing the faith to all the nations, to be elected the successor of St. Peter, since St. Peter himself every pope is, of course, apostolic. He wants to share the faith. He wants to grow the faith. But on the path to the papacy, he's the first in St. Peter who had begun by going far from his native place in order to share the treasure of the faith. And so Pope Leo has seen firsthand what happens with the support that comes from other parts of the Catholic world to help make the church stronger in places where it needs the prayerful support of brothers and sisters throughout the globe, as well as the financial support of brothers and sisters across the globe. And so that experience led him to do something unprecedented this time, just to be able to maximize what the church can do together when we all pull together to help those areas where perhaps the church is poorer, but at the same time often more vibrant. We're now in the United States experiencing the fruit of the missionary investment of our fathers and our grandparents from previous decades. They contributed to the World Mission Sunday collection. It was sent to the mission. And now so many of our parishes have priests from the Philippines, priests from Nigeria and Uganda, in Kenya, priests from India, priests from missionary countries and parts of Latin America. All of this shows how the church helps each other, that when we sacrifice out of love for others, sometimes you'll reap what we sow in having missionary vocations from these countries. And so what we're doing this Sunday is not only expressing our missionary discipleship, but we're also laying the groundwork, hopefully, for future generations of Catholics in the United States to receive the fruit of our generosity as we've got missionary priests who will come to our country and maybe give us our last rite, maybe give the sacraments to grandkids and great-grandkids. And so that's the way God in his providence cares for the church in every generation, that we are our brothers and sisters' keepers, and the more we sacrifice, the more it spiritually boomerangs to our advantage.
Monsignor, speaking of providential, World Mission Sunday comes on the heels of Pope Leo's first apostolic exhortation, Dilexite Te, and you just put your finger on really the heart of one of his central messages there, is that when we give to the poor, when we serve the poor, they give us something back. And you just mentioned some very concrete fruits that come of that in terms of the really missionary priests from other countries that come to the United States. But this is an apostolic exhortation. That means it's an appeal that emphatically urges us to do something, to take some kind of action. And there's something very personal about this. Pope Leo seems to be calling each of us to examine our consciences and our priorities to make sure that care for the poor is really integral to our everyday faith. I wondered what you thought about the timing of this year's World Mission Sunday.
It's very hopeful for us. It's not a surprise that Pope Leo, the main theme of whose pontificate is clearly in the one Christ we are one, to challenge us to care for our brothers and sisters who need our help the most. And that was what happened in the second exhortation in 4 hands, the Dilexite Te, showing that just as Jesus loved us in all our poverty and all our need, so he's calling us to love others by that same standard. And like that begins with the neighbor closest to us, but it can't turn a blind eye to our brothers and sisters who are in need. And he specifies various categories there. On World Mission Sunday, one of the biggest categories of those that the collection helps are our really poor brothers and sisters. When I was in Bangladesh a few months back, I discovered that practically every priest in the country survives just on the mass stipends that come from foreign countries, and they don't even get one every day. So maximally, they'd be living on $3,650 a year, but many of them survive on only a few $100s a year, and out of those few $100s, they've got to care for the poor families in their parishes, but it costs only $10,000 to build a church in that country, whereas often we're building churches for several million in the States. And so he wants us to look far afield and see a ripe harvest, and then to recognize that we are able to fertilize those fields so that they're able to bear fruit first in us as we give toward others, we become more like the divine giver. We grow more human and more divine. But then objectively, as we help others, God in his providence sends them back to care for us in a way that they can. And this is the upward spiral of love that defines our Christian moral life.
Yeah, well, Monsignor, again, your piece is Help Me, Help Missionaries, Pope Leo's historic video appeal, which you can find at ncregister.com. We're so grateful for your time, and all of us are praying that this weekend proves a very fruitful one for the Pontifical Mission Society, for the missions around the world.
Thanks very much, Matthew. Thanks, Shannon. And in that article in the Register, not only can you read my commentary on the Pope's video message, but also click on it and watch it. It takes just over a minute, but you won't finish watching it the same as you began.
Yeah. Very good advice, as always. So, Monsignor Roger Landry, thanks so much.
God bless you, Matthew. God bless you, Shannon.
Well, that's it for Register Radio for this week. Remember, for more news, commentary, and analysis, go to ncregister.com. On behalf of Shannon Mullen and our producer, Michael McCall, I'm Matthew Bunson. Please, until next time, take care and God bless.